Hello and welcome to EX Law. I'm Becky Norman, the usual host, but for the next 6 episodes, I'm handing over the mic. Gethin Nadin, one of the most respected voices in workplace wellbeing, is hosting a special series for us called The Good Work Effect. Each episode, he sits down with a different expert and asks them all the same question. How would society change if more people had genuinely good workplaces? No prep, no running order, no agenda, just that one question, and we'll see where it takes them. This week, Gethin's guest is Perry Timms, a globally renowned HR thought leader, and Gethin gives him the full intro in just a moment. They get into why purpose doesn't need a purposeful employer, why holding on to people might be the wrong goal entirely, and what happens to management when technical skill stops being the rare thing. Here's Gethin and Perry.
Hello, welcome. This week, I'm joined by a man that needs probably no introduction, but I'll give you one either way, and that's Perry Timms. Perry has over 3 decades of experience in business change and performance, with the last 20 plus years in HR and organisational development. He ranked number 1 in HR's Most Influential Thinkers in 2022, his 5th inclusion on that list, and is now in the HR Most Influential Hall of Fame. He's a 4 times guest professor, 2 times TEDx speaker, 3 times author, 4 times Engagement 101 global influencer, plus global people and culture icon. Perry is a chartered member of the CIPD, a fellow at the RSA, and in 2024 was honoured with a Lifetime Achievement Award for his work in self-managed democratic organisations. And he's also a Thinkers 360 Top 100 Global HR influencer. Welcome, Perry. Pleasure to have you with us. We could probably do a whole podcast just on me reading your bio out.
Thank you. It does get a bit silly, doesn't it? But with the subject of it being about work, like when I started work, I had no idea those were the sort of things that would end up being part of my introduction. But whilst I sort of have a little tiny cringe, I also have a very kind of proud moment of when I was 18, I would look at myself and think, wow, well done you. So there we go.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's celebrate it all, right? So
thank you.
Let's get into the podcast. Let me ask a question. How would society change if more people had genuinely good workplaces?
If we started with just a sort of fact that we probably maybe do sometimes remind ourselves, and sometimes we avoid the thought of it, about 80,000 hours of our our lives are in work, our waking lives. So it's an enormous part of who we are and what we end up becoming, right? So I think we'll start with that sort of fact. But most people would think about that as 80,000 hours to then do what I want to do in life. And it almost feels like, what on earth would that equation be if you flipped it and said, why don't I channel my life through those 80,000 hours, and then when I've finished at the end of that particular kind of chapter, I can then explore what else I want to do in the world. So there's something very wrong about the potential drudgery of 80,000 hours, and so many people, as we know, Gethin, will report back on feeling disconnected and not engaged in their work, as we've seen from year-on-year surveys across the world, to the point that people kind of get even a bit depressed about that and think, well, if nobody else is, at least I'm not odd. But actually look at how almost like devaluing it appears. But if I think back to my starting journey in the workplace, I didn't go to university because that wasn't the kind of thing my family did. Working class boy from Northampton. Did the kind of sixth form thing because I just really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Careers advice was really not there. And I think it's still a bit patchy. So I ended up applying for some roles that were quite sort of recognisable, I suppose you'd say, in office work. One was that in Northampton, Barclaycard had a headquarter building. And there was quite a strong footprint in the civil service, so I applied for a role there. And I got offered both. And then when I said, well, which one do I go for, thinking Barclaycard might be more glamorous, my mum said, well, the civil service has a good pension. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm only 18, so why am I bothered about that? But I like the feel of it. I like the feel of the civil service, almost like as a place where you could kind of educate yourself while you were working, because that's how it seemed. They were talking very strongly about career progression and so on. So I ended up making that choice. Best thing I ever did, because it literally was where I found myself. I did administrative stuff, a bit of team leading, but it's when I got on projects and I got to run projects, I was kind of like, wow, this is a thing. And I liked it. I liked organising. I liked bringing teams together. I liked seeing progress and outputs. So without that, I really struggle to think what I'd have wanted to be in life, because that civil service experience just opened up my mind to what are you good at? And I used the phrase recently in a LinkedIn post that almost like the capabilities I've got found me. I didn't unearth them.
I see.
They kind
Yeah.
of found me. And that felt really important to me as well. So I think that's where work can have such an enhancing aspect to your life, if I think you're open-minded enough to be looking for it and letting it come to you. So, yeah, that's where I'll start. It can help people kind of sort out, who am I and what am I here for?
I guess it also, like that 80,000 hours, like what if somebody said, we're going to make you do 80,000 hours of something you hate? You just wouldn't do it, would you? You'd be like, you'd understand really quickly. Well, there'd be no, I mean, quite frankly, there'd be no point living, right? If you had to do, if you think of the worst thing you hate, so say, hate ironing, and somebody said, you've got to iron for 80,000 hours, you just like, well, this is no life, right? So I think that's really important. But I think this idea that work is good for people, right? We know in the research it's good. Working is good for your mental health. Like even amongst people that don't have to work and they've kind of won the lottery, stuff like that. Everyone needs some kind of purpose. They need some reason to kind of wake up. But I like this idea that work like helps you find yourself in a way, you know. Because I'm the same. I think like you and I probably have the same thing, but the overwhelming most popular message outside of a sales message that I get through LinkedIn is basically somebody saying, how do I get to do what you're doing? Or I want to do what you do. Nice. And, you know, you want to go back and read your bio and say, do all these things, and then maybe you'll get there. But it feels like what people want to stand on stage and they want people to give them a round of applause for sharing their ideas, or they want that platform. And you probably like me never set out to do this. That wasn't the intention. That a byproduct of caring about the job and finding what you were good at was somebody then goes, I actually want your opinion on something, and I want that written in a book or an article or for you to say something on stage. And I would say now, thinking about reflecting on my own career, when what you were just saying, the things I like most about my job was never the things I set out to do or the things I thought I would be good at. Work found those things and brought it out of me. And my work is kind of give me a huge amount of life purpose.
So true, so true. So I can think of a couple of little pinpoint moments in my life where I was probably about 9 or 10 years old, and it was in an English class, and I loved English. I didn't really like English lit much because that was very much probing into things like Shakespearean constructs and what have you. But English itself, I absolutely loved it. And the teacher said to me, will you stand at the front of the class, and the class will give you some characters and some topics, and will you weave a story together? I mean, you just kind of go yes, don't you? At that point, you don't really know why you're asked or what was behind it. And they did, and they threw characters at me, and I strung a story together, and it was all quite fun. And I look at that and think, that teacher saw something in me. She saw that I could perhaps improv, that I had imagination, that I could make connections. I mean, I didn't know at the time, but when I look back on that, I'm like, wow, that was the first time I ever got asked to stand up in front of people and do something almost like totally off the cuff. I didn't know I had it in me, but she clearly did. And I think when you go through work, if you can find those people who see something in you that you don't even know about, I can't think of a greater gift that people can give you. It's normally in a job or a task or something, isn't it? And I don't think we kind of tag those moments in our working lives as really consequential in us doing that discovery piece of what am I good at? What can that turn into as a part of life? And I guess it comes back to that Ikigai principle that we know about with the 4 intersectional circles. You know, what do you love doing? What does the world need? What are you good at? And can you get paid for it? It almost feels like that ought to be part of the educational makeup of what we help people learn, because then they would think, yeah, what am I good at? And if I don't know, how do I find out? Work is often a brilliant vessel for you finding out what you like and are good at, and that you can get value out of and get paid for. Because I think there's something about the story of us that we don't quite take enough countenance of, because the story of us is then linked to the family, to the communities that we're in, and then to the question of this podcast, the society that you're a part of. And I think if you're having a positive and useful exchange of opportunities in the workplace, you want to bring that into family, and you want to bring that into life and communities. I'll give you a kind of twee example here. Work helped me discover things like coaching questions and coaching skills. Do I use them in life? All the time, whether it's helping somebody on a train who looks upset and doesn't know how to get themselves home, or whether it's my dad getting stuck on some kind of problem with his benefits and pensions. I'm coaching people all the time. Work gave me that. I wouldn't have found that any other way. So the transferable skills thing, we ought to give that kudos, because that's a huge part of what work helps you understand and deploy, that can make life a lot more purposeful, bountiful, and useful.
And I think that it feels like it's been lost, hasn't it? Like the role that work plays in your life, because not most people do not get to do a really purposeful job with a really purposeful or mission oriented business.
Yeah.
Most people do jobs because they have to do them, and they've got to, they've got rent to pay for and mortgage to pay for. But I think it's really. I was with some friends last night, and they're getting married in the south of France in the next month or so, and they've asked me to officiate the wedding. And the reason why I'm officiating the wedding is not only am I a friend, but they were like, "You're basically a public speaker. You're the only person that we think we could kind of stand up in front of people and actually deliver a confident talk." And so, to your point, that's an example there where work developed a skill that is now benefiting me internally. But I think it also these micro experiences, these micro kind of learnings you get at work as well. I think that's feels like where the purpose is, right? The person that finds out I'm good at sales because I'm actually quite personable. I don't think anyone goes to a careers advisor and says, "I want to work in software sales." But something in them gets brought out in work where somebody goes, "I think you might be pretty good at this, by the way."
That's true, because you're right to sort of tag purposeful companies, because we all know stories about things like Patagonia and how good they are for the environment and how nice it is a place to work, etc. But there's only so many of those, because a lot of organizations are still quite industrialized, mechanical, hierarchical, all that. So the work I've done in self-managed and democratic organizations are ones who say, no, actually, we're going to create a more participatory environment because we believe that's where work should go. Others say, I don't care as long as I'm stacking up the cash because that keeps my shareholders happy, etc. And that tends to manifest in the experience, kind of healthy organizations and sort of unhealthy ones, but they're still profitable. But you can still find your purpose within that, as long as it's not that you're corrupting or you're distorting your value set. What you value in life ought to really strongly to connect to the value that organization exists to create in the world, whether it's software sales, whether it's retail, whether it's therapy, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be a noble thing, as long as what you can do is say what I value manifests in the work I do to create the value for the company. And as long as your value set isn't compromised, I think there's something about that again, we lose sight of it. And purpose feels like it's such a big, far off thing. We'll bring it nearer. Like, what's my purpose? What do I want to be in life? I found out quite early in my life that I was almost just naturally inclined to generosity. And people kind of went, oh, how nice. It's almost like, is it? I mean, it kind of feels nice, but it just feels like a natural thing for me to do, to want to give. And then some people said, oh, no, be careful because people will take advantage of that. I'm like, will they? And clearly they do, right? Does it stop me doing that? No, maybe I've got a good filter. But if you can find those natural inclinations that manifest in the work you do, there's a recipe there that work will feel better, give you more, and then you will be able to then give in other ways outside in society, to the kids and the family, whatever it might be, voluntary work. So I think there's that little recipe of what do I value in life and what can I give, and what will I then get that enables me to then give in different ways. We tend to think about it as the economic transaction only, and you're right, there's so much more to it.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because I think it does bring it down to those just the micro things that happen every day, right? And rather than, because I think you're right. I did one of the very early talks I did was talking about purpose, and somebody asked a question at the end, and they said, "How do you have purpose working on a checkout in Tesco?"
Yeah.
And I was like, well, the reason why you go to work could be a pretty big purpose in the first, like, you've got 2 girls at home and they need to be looked after. And so that in itself is a pretty big purpose to just go to work in the first place. But I think you're right. I'd never thought about it that way, but that linking, what is it that you care about? And it doesn't have to be this big mission orientated thing. It doesn't have to be saving the world or kind of recycling. No. It's just, do you care about kindness? Do you care about making somebody else happy? Do you care about, you love human interaction? And if God can give you those things, then that is where your purpose is fulfilled. And I suspect quite strongly that's where people start to become more satisfied with the work they do.
Yeah.
rather than their job. Because again, I think that's the thing, is like, I'm working on a checkout in Tesco. I'm not doing this kind of big glamorous job, this kind of traditional career arc that people might expect. But if you enjoy it and you like turning up and you enjoy the people you work with, then you're probably doing better than most people in higher paid jobs in more attractive environments.
Yeah, and we've seen some examples, I think. The Reed research last year that asked Gen Z types what about management roles, and they pretty much most went, no, I'm not having that. And when they were asked why, it was like, well, I've seen what it's done to my parents. Like, I don't want to be obsessively drawn into stressful situations that I don't really want to be part of. So I think the job proposition is somewhat broken. And I think that's probably explaining why we've had little bursts of happiness matters at work and well-being matters at work and inclusivity matters at work. And people have gone, oh, here we go. And then it kind of bounces off the kind of commercial reality or whatever. And it just doesn't take a foothold. So people almost have like a double decrease on that. And I think that's the point that you just raised there about when people say, well, how can I derive joy from being on the checkout at a supermarket? It's like, but what about the times when there's an isolated older person who comes in and you're their only social interaction of the week? What about that? And reframing it. When I go into places like hotels or conference centers, there's somebody on reception and they've got a name badge on, I will instantly say, hello, Chloe, or hello, Jane. And the response you get from them is totally different because you've recognized them as a human being, not just them as a vehicle of continuity in your experience, and thanking them, even if it's only the tiniest thing. These are the sort of micro things that you don't have to do, but I think you kind of recognize just how much it makes people feel valued. Like you, when I do stage stuff, I now will often thank the AV team because nobody even notices them. But without them, it wouldn't be slick, would it? We wouldn't have slides, we wouldn't have microphones. So there's just genuinely something about us being tuned into the fact that maybe people didn't choose that work, but that doesn't mean to say you can't recognize that they want to do it to the best of their ability and have a feel that they make a difference. You can help them do that every day, I think. So yeah, that thing about the job is almost like, think beyond that and think about, like you say, human interaction, relationships, helping people, making somebody's day a bit brighter. I think we've heard the story of the famous bus driver in the US who was so positive when he retired. Like, there was a massive fanfare about his departure because he just welcomed people onto the bus and changed their day.
And you've opened up something else here, because I think you're right about that checkout example, as you were talking about the isolated, lonely older person that goes in. There was a supermarket, Marks and Spencer's, that was closed down in Wales recently, and on its closing day, people turned up for its last day and people were being interviewed by the news crying, and they were all older people where, their daily, because I think one of the ladies said she doesn't do her shopping all at once because she'd have nothing to do the rest of the days. So she'll go to the shop. And the comedian Paul Whitehouse said his mum used to go and get tomatoes like one at a time because it gave her kind of purpose to go out for a day, get a tomato, go out, meet it for lunch, do the same thing tomorrow. And so you don't always know in those roles the impact you're having on society as well. But I think you've opened up a new idea here, which is you are playing a part in somebody else's experience of work when you notice their name and you recognize them when there's a hotel desk and things. And this is almost like expanding this conversation about not just positive workplaces and a good society, but the interlinks between those two things, where as a effective, caring member of society, you're doing your best to make sure somebody else's work experience is good as well. You're not a colleague. You might not even be a customer. You're not the boss. But you're basically saying, actually, the more light I can bring to somebody's day, the more light they're going to bring to somebody else's day. And that's how you create a society then, right?
I think so, yeah. And it is just simple acts of human sort of recognition. And I suppose, however we want to define the work we do, we're on some kind of quest, aren't we, to do it to our best ability, to make a difference, to have a little recognition. And so somebody once asked me about how do I kind of seem to get so much joy out of what I do. And I'm like, well, I am lucky because it's intellectually stimulating. I work with great people who stretch my thinking and all sorts. I said, but I've just recognized that every day, if I'm not making a positive difference to at least one person, it's like, kind of, what's the point of it? So I might be in deep work and very sort of isolating myself on purpose, but I will deliberately break out and just find a couple of things on LinkedIn or send a message to one of the team, because it is almost like it can't just be about that personal sense of achievement. You got to do the connecting stuff to see what positive difference you can make to them and help them with and so on. And I think that's what gives people a bit of a kick. And you'd get that if you ran a kind of community group. You should also get that as part of a community in the workplace. So then it becomes transferable out to society. So when you're out and about and you see somebody who looks a bit lost, you go and help them out. I mean, I was in the airport recently with a couple of the video team, and one guy looked completely lost. And the videographer went over to him, started talking to him. He must have spent 15 minutes trying to make sure he got on his right plane. He didn't have to do that. But I came away thinking very differently about the differences we can make when we overtly want to help people out.
And I can't help but think back to that question that we both get, where like, how do I do what you do, or how do I get the kind of career that you might have got? I know you fairly well now. We've known each other for a while. You have not got to where you are because of your brain alone, right? I think your heart has played a big part of that.
Thank you.
I think because you would not have, I can tell you would not have the resilience to deal with the stuff you've had to deal with if you didn't feel like you were making a difference to people's lives.
True.
You wouldn't be able to push through stuff,
True.
right? I mean, I see it in my own life with the parliamentary work I do, which is all pro bono. It's a lot of work. It's in my own time. And when everyone kind of says like, how are you doing it? It's like, if I didn't feel like I was trying at least to make a difference, I don't know how I could continue.
Great example.
If it was just commercial,
Great example,
I could decide not to put the hours in or not to do that stuff. I think that's the overwhelming thing, I think, with the work that I've seen that you do is that. And it's interesting that's how you kind of started and kind of what you wanted from your career was this care and this heart for what you do.
Really good point. And it's interesting, if we flip it into the work dynamic for a second, when we talk about things like talent, there's a phrase that's come out, is that we're looking for people that are talent dense, or they've got talent density. And what they really mean is they are not just a good practitioner per a job description. They do all these extra things in and around what they do. They might be an industry commentator. They might get involved in lots of research activities, mentor people, do community talks, whatever it is. What we're describing there is somebody who fails to see work just as a bounded package. And they're like, there are all these other things I'm interested in and I'm capable of doing. And I kind of bolt them into my world. It looks like work, but it's probably something where it's more of a calling or just an interest. And so I think no matter what level of work you're at, new, administrative, strategic, specialist, whatever it is, you've always got more than just that box of tricks that are defining you as a kind of economic value exchange at work. And it's like, how can you find those and let them almost like shape what you become in the workspace? Because I think those are the things that you, again, are perhaps so much more naturally inclined to want to do. They'll give you a kickback. That's almost like the system saying, see, when you want to, you can do that, and you get a rush out of it, and it almost opens up your horizon so you don't feel boxed in. I think work feels like it's very boxed in and intense at the moment. And the breakout is, but what about if I want to play in spaces I want to play in? That's not just piling it on, that's me getting something back from this core that I've been sort of I suppose, contracted to do. So I think we ought to see that. And whether you call it the edge or additionality or discretionary effort or whatever it is, I don't even care what the term is. But I think you've got to find those things that you're just drawn to and can have value in.
But it's going to get more important, right? As AI makes work more. So we're obviously hearing about some of those entry level jobs going. You know, young people have been asked for skills they haven't had the opportunity to develop. So, but when you start thinking about that the human skills, that human side of work, which I think most people agree is going to become more important when ability to level off content creation and stuff like that. It's kind of the over and above stuff comes out. You know, recruiting people on their ability to just care about people. Like, sure, I don't know if there's any evidence behind this, but I'm sure there probably is, that the most caring person, the most empathetic person probably makes a really good customer service agent, probably makes a really good account manager. That person who just wants other people to have a great experience.
Yep.
And do we capture that as a skill set? We will customer service skills, but customer service skills is show me how you've had this skill in the past, right? Rather than, like you say, I run a youth group and I can get young people excited about something. What that is a skill.
Really good point. The relational side of things is definitely going to be something that we'll have to have more focus on because of the nature of the sort of algorithmic processing becoming automated. I totally see that. Whatever the hype is about AI's automation potential, it will eventually start to do that. We see it now, don't we? Anyway, with kind of us booking our own flights and so on. So the only interactions we have are largely through security. And then when we board, but what that then means is the security and the boarding becomes a point of differentiation because that's the human interaction thing. So I think we've heard about sort of robotic surgery. And therefore, what people are saying is, well, surgeons in the future don't need to be just good on human anatomy. They need to understand human psychology because they'll probably talk to the patient, get to know the patient. The patient feels confident that there's a robot doing the work with them and they're looking after their vital signs and guiding that to a successful outcome. So that's totally different from technical capability. That's relational strength, that's believability, it's sincerity, compassion, all those kind of things. And we're seeing it in leaders now. Those people who seem to generate the sense that people would run through walls for them are not good technicians. They are good humanists. They are people who can galvanize spirit and say, I see you, I recognize you, I'm here for you, I'll help you. And then people go, great, that's what I want from a leader. And I'll push through. So yeah, I think you're right about the shift in that what work will likely have to become is much more relational and human. Therefore, the experience of it needs to be much more communal and social. And therefore, that you would hope ripples out into communities and society as well, because it has got very technical, very withdrawn, and very sort of transactional.
Which the management role has, right? You mentioned before about the number of young people who just aren't interested or don't see management in their future because they've seen their parents kind of just get like
battered,
dragged down by it.
Yeah.
And, no one's ever thought about the best manager they've ever had in their career as he was technically or she was technically good at their job.
That's right.
It was they cared about me. I felt they had my back. They supported me. They encouraged me. They coached me. And again, it's those skills that you mentioned at the start that are not really integral to the workplace, but are also pretty integral to society and how functioning you become. Because the Perry Timms who's really kind and supportive to the employees that work for him is the same Perry Timms that is going into a hotel and making a point of humanizing the person that's at the other end of that transaction. There's also the person that's helping that lost person around the airport.
Yep.
And so suddenly this is like, actually, these workplaces are getting better. And workplaces as a kind of microcosm of society, which has come up quite a lot in these episodes.
Totally agree.
That's it. It's almost an aggregation of marginal gains, right? If you can do all these great, positive, kind, supportive things at work, that's how you can create a community. You don't even need to be in community to do these things because every employee is sort of part of a community and probably part of the same community that you are living and working in.
Yeah. And I think you're right on something that we've perhaps lost sight of in pursuit of things like retention and career paths, is that organizations and work can become places where, or should become places and are places where people grow. They grow capability, interest levels, friendships, whatever it might be. If we think about that, there's much more abundance to be had in that sort of recipe rather than just the transactional, we'll hold on to you for as long as possible. Because if you say that proposition is about growth, you might recognize that growth might mean beyond us, somewhere else. You'll go somewhere else. And there's something quite healthy in knowing that you're not there to lock people in. You're there to give them the most you can, to get the most you can, until that's not necessarily the recipe anymore. And I think there's something about workplaces being like the perennial classroom. And you leading yourself through that as a person who's shaping their quest in life, which sounds very grandiose, but it's not, because that's what's going on. You've got a quest in life. Work can be an area where you can make sense of that and use new things to get that quest really clear in your mind about what it is. But recognize, like, every workplace is a classroom. You're just learning stuff all the time, and you are building credentials in you that you're going to be able to use in all sorts of ways. So there's something about the employee value proposition that we've just made a bit sterile.
I think that's a really good point to end on. Perry Timms, thank you so much.
Cheers, Gethin. Thanks, mate.